large part of this course is learning how to develop the interface using XAML. We've looked at all of the views earlier, but I want to begin to explore more of the XAML properties or attributes for each of these different views. So I want to give you kind of a reference video here. In this case, we're going to start with labels, entries, and editors, since they're kind of grouped together as text-based views. I also want to give you a perspective in terms of writing XAML. Now I have here the XAML for a label. We see the property name equals and then a value. And for our XAML we have, this is for a label, we have a less than symbol, and we do this all in one with a /greater than symbol to end that tag, though we could very easily have an opening label tag and a closing label tag. So in terms of the properties, I want to kind of divide these up into three different areas just to allow us to eat the elephant one bite at a time. So we have some markup extensions. The main one we're going to use here is the name extension. And so it's x:\name with a capital N, and then the string we want. For the name of our view, it could also be a layout, it could even be a page. You want to add a name if you're going to reference this item in your C#. And later we'll look at how to do view binding between XAML views. So we have one markup extension in this case. We also have a lot of what we call universal XAML attributes or XAML properties. These are common pretty much to most, if not all, controls, whether they be layouts or views or even pages in our XAML code. There's a few that I use a lot, and that's background color, height request, horizontal options, margin, vertical options, and width request. So I've highlighted those in green here. But there's so much more we can do. You'll see some properties here such as grid columns and grid rows and column spans and row spans. Those are only used when we use a grid layout. Some of these are read-only. We can't set the height or width. We have to set height request and width request, but we can get the current height and width as properties in our C# code or in view binding. We can also set scales, we can rotate objects, we can change the opacity, and we can provide a minimum and a maximum height and width request. But again, the main ones I use are just a few here. Then we have properties that are specific to that particular view. Some of these will go across different views. You can see font size in all three of these views, whether it be a label, entry, or editor, because they'll have fonts. Same with font family and font attributes. So again, these are the ones I mostly use with views: font attributes, font size, horizontal text alignment, which can determine where the text appears inside of the view horizontally. There's also a vertical one. Line break mode, how do you want this to wrap? Do you want to wrap on words? Do you want to do truncation? Line height, if you have multiple lines, such as max lines. What's the padding? How much distance do I want between the edge of the view and the text? And of course, the big one here is text. That's going to be the display and the text color. So if we think in terms of developing our XAML code and looking at what are the common universal properties that I use, and then what's the properties specific to that type of view. Note I've also given you a reference down here to the Microsoft documentation for labels. I would encourage you to really spend some time in that documentation. There's lots of golden nuggets in that documentation of things that you might never even think about using some of these views for and ways to do things. As you're typing in your XAML code, pay attention to the IntelliSense. So you're going to see both properties or attributes, you'll see classes, and you'll see events. And this will give you an idea in terms of what you can add in. Of course, we also have the properties panel within Visual Studio. But if you're looking for something color and you don't remember the name, text color, font color, just start typing color, and this list is going to reduce, so you're only seeing items that have the word color in them. And note the different icons here. We have property attributes, which is a wrench, classes, and events, the lightning bolt. This will give you an idea of what kind of events you can use within a particular view. Let's take a look at the labels in use. I created a little app here for some reference to labels, entries, and editors, and I used a flyout menu. So we're going to go to the label page. Here's the XAML code for that label page. So I've got a scroll view, and inside that a vertical stack layout. So my first label is just this word label up here, and there I'm using a font family of Arial Black. I set the text color to dark purple using RGB code, and horizontal options, vertical options are centered. The next label, the one that says Phoenix, Arizona, has a height request of 40 and a width request of 200. Font is a medium. Change the text color, and the font attributes of being bold here is not being applied because the default font I'm using is Open Sans. There's not a bold reference in our fonts for that. But what I really want to point out is the vertical text alignment is center and the horizontal text alignment is center. So that the caption of the button or the text of the button is centered in the button both horizontally and vertically. As opposed to this one that says the Grand Canyon, here I set the font family to Apple Chancery, having installed those fonts for this app in the font resources. But notice that the horizontal text alignment is start and the vertical text alignment is start. So that means it's going to horizontally be against the left edge and vertically up against the top. On the third one, I used the XAML new line characters, ampersand, #10 semicolon. That's the Unicode value of a new line carriage return, which in this case, the 1 here would represent 16. So the 10 is hexadecimal. So this text consists of carriage return, not 1, not 2, carriage return, but 3 lines of text. So we get our 3 lines of text there. But here I set the vertical text alignment to end and the horizontal text alignment to end. So therefore it's going to be up at the bottom and up against the right hand side. Now it fits in there because the height request being 50, those 3 lines just fit perfectly. But if I make this say 70, notice that it is up against the bottom. It's that end vertical alignment. The next one I simply want to show you can take a label and you can rotate it. So I rotated it here a -20 degrees. I also used character spacing, where I space out the characters a little bit more within the text. The next label shows how to use formatted text, and we can use spans. So I have a span here of just the word Arizona, and I can set the text color to maroon and font size 40, attributes bold. Text is known as just a font size of 12, we get really small, and then the next span is Grand Canyon State. There I use 24, I change the font family and set the text color to purple. So this is an example where we might have a label that has an opening tag and a closing tag, because inside of that we want to embed the label.formatted text. We can actually take any of these properties and do them that way. Most of them though, you just want to do the property equals and the value. The last 3 here are simply showing the line break mode. So I have text being set to all 3 of these. Notice there's no text property, so in the C# code I set the text equal to the Gettysburg Address. And there you can see I have a string Gettysburg, and then I'm setting LBL Gettysburg1.text equals Gettysburg, and do that for all 3 of those. So we have a line break mode. The first one is tail truncation. So in a label, when you set line break mode to tail truncation, only gives you 1 line. It's going to fit as much as it can and then give you the 3 ellipses that there's more to after that. The second label here is head truncation. It's going to show us the very end of the Gettysburg Address in this case, and where it truncates it, it's going to give us 3 ellipses at the beginning. And the last one is middle truncation. We're going to get a little bit of the beginning and a little bit of the end, and then some ellipses in between. So those are just some ways of formatting labels. Now we also have entries. Entries are a view where the user enters a single line of information. We use these a lot in data forms. Now we have our universal ones, such as background color, horizontal options, height request, and width request. But we also have our view-specific ones for the entry. Again, a lot of things dealing with fonts. There's one for keyboard. What type of keyboard we want to have show up on the screen. So if we're having a field that's just numbers, we can use a numeric keyboard. And this app shows all the different types of keyboards that are available to us based on the entry field. Entries allow us to put a placeholder for information what the user should enter there. And we can opt to have a clear button made available. And then we can do events such as completed. When they press the Enter key, we want to do something. There's also a text change. Whenever the text is changing, we can do something. And then there's focused and unfocused, when the object gets the focus or loses the focus. Let's take a look at some entry examples. In the first one, I have a horizontal stack layout with a label, and how I usually use labels is to label maybe an entry. So the label says enter name, and then we have our entry in that horizontal stack layout to the right of that. This one I just sent the width request to 200, height request 25. I gave it a font size of medium, text color of red, and font attributes of bold. And also set a highlight and unhighlight. Let me just enter some text here. So when I click in that field, it turns yellow. That's going to be the highlight code that's operating in our C#. And I could type my name. Once I leave that field and I go to the next one, notice it unhighlights. Let's take a look at that code real quick. So I'm simply determining which entry was clicked and setting the background color to yellow on the highlight and setting the background color to white on the unhighlight. On the next entry, I set the background color to a light yellow, change the font size, give it a text color of green, change the font families. So you can see it's now Arial, Narrow, Bold, Italic. And then I also set the clear button visibility while editing. So if I come in here and type something in and decide that's not what I want, I get this little clear button on the far right. And I can click that and it removes the text that's been entered. There's also one here on completed. So if I type in my name and press the Enter key, that constitutes a completion, and I get completed, welcome Stephen. Okay, I get a little display alert. And just to show you that alert, here's the on completed, display alert, completed, welcome, the text of that entry, an exclamation mark, and then my button of OK. In the next entry, I set the alignment, the horizontal text alignment to end. When I have fields that constitute numeric values, I like to have those aligned to the right or aligned to end. I also set a placeholder here of age that we see in there. Of course, as soon as I start to type something in here, that placeholder goes away. And then the keyboard, let me erase that. For the keyboard, I'm going to go to the I/O menu of my simulator and choose Keyboard Toggle Software Keyboard. So since I'm running on a desktop, so let me use my keyboard on the desktop rather than the keyboard for the emulator. But again, here I can type in 23. Now notice this is a numeric keyboard as opposed to the default keyboard or plain keyboard that has text. The next entry is in a vertical stack layout, which I have the entry. It says enter password, and I set here the is password to true, so that if I type something, I'm not going to see what's being typed in case somebody's looking over my shoulder. Now I also set some rules here of 8 characters minimum, includes uppercase, lowercase, and a number, and then a label here that's saying whether the password is valid or invalid. So until I type something that meets all of the needs of 8 characters, uppercase, lowercase, and contains a number, it's going to show it as invalid. But as soon as it meets that validity, it says password is valid. And again, let me just show you the code for that. So I simply set a string of uppercase, string of lowercase, string of numbers, sets a flag to true, and then set a couple more flags of UC for uppercase, LC for lowercase, num for numeric. And the flag, if the entry text is less than 8, it's going to be false. Otherwise, it would be the value of flag, which would be true. 4, I'm going to go through each letter, and if it's uppercase, I'm going to set the uppercase flag to true, lowercase flag to true, and number flag to true. And then if those are all valid, we'll say the password is valid, set the color to green. Otherwise, we'll say password is invalid and set the color to red. So those are just some examples of using entries. Finally, we have the editor, the user to enter multiple lines of text. And again, we have universal properties such as width request, height request, background color, and then properties that are specific to the editor. Again, a lot dealing with text values and the fonts, horizontal text alignment, vertical text alignment, and then pretty much the same events available to us to the editor that were available in the entry. Let's take a look at some uses of the editor. So the editor allows us to put in multiple lines. So what I enter wraps within the editor. Notice I've got a little squiggly here under the, so it has some spell checking built in, and I can actually click on that and correct it. Now, the question I posed here was scrollability of the editor doesn't seem to work. So if I do just some numbers going down, I can't get scroll. I get a scroll bar, but it doesn't work. And even using the cursor arrow, I can't scroll down. Now, on the Android side, the cursor arrow does work. This is apparently a bug right now that Microsoft is hopefully going to fix. We'll see down the road there are some other editors from third parties that we could use that I believe the scroll feature does work on. But I'm sure Microsoft will fix this forthwith. Just something to be aware of. Now you'll see the length is being changed here as far as the number of characters. So if I just delete, you'll see that number is changing. And so that's coming from this text changed equals update length. And again, let's look at that code. So here's our update length. LBL length.text equals length. I'm getting the text.length to toString of the editor question. That's the name of my editor. And concatenating the word characters. And then finally, I just want to show you that you can actually rotate a field, and that still works. Not quite sure why you would rotate it, but that feature is available. So that's the use of the editor. I tend to use entries far more than I use editors. But if you need these or enter a good block of text, the editor is available to you. If you just jumped into this video, you can see all the videos from the .NET MAUI Practicum playlist by clicking on the image in the lower right. And if you'd like to be alerted to future videos I create, you can click my picture in the top right to subscribe to the channel.